Go where your best prayers take you, unclench the fists of your spirit and take it easy. Breathe deeply of the glad air and live one day at a time. Know that you're precious and learn to trust. Amen.
Amen.
Well, it is early in the new year, and I don't know about you, but sometimes I wonder why I do the things that I do. I always do my annual physical this week. I did it last week. And of course, the moment of truth came after Christmas and the holidays, because I wait, my name is called, and I'm thinking, oh, not again, and Nurse Debbie takes me back, and what's the first thing you do? And I always wear as little clothing as I can get with, and I take everything out of my pockets. I take my shoes off. She watches me pour stuff in the floor. I climb on the scales. And once again, I'll do the walk of shame. She'll go 6 or 7 pounds, 6 or 7. I'm going, oh. And actually, no, that's not true. It was more like 9 or 10. I'm not kidding. The walk of shame. And I thought, so then I was thinking, this is off. Actually, a good checkup. All the way back to the car, I thought, oh, no, please. And I get in the car, and actually my spirits were lifted because NPR was on the radio, and there was a story about a female who was losing weight. And I thought, gosh, I need to hear this. She was wearing a Fitbit or one of those things and exercising more. She was up to walking 15 miles a day. I thought, good gracious. She was eating better. She loved jelly beans, no jelly beans. Chocolate's my thing, or actually anything sweet is my thing. She was eating leafy vegetables and apples and carrots. Man, I was pumped up. And then and she was even doing social things, more social activities. I thought, man, this is all good information. This is what I need to do. And then came the hit, and it said, and she lost 1,000 pounds. And I went, 1,000? And now she weighs 6,000 pounds. And I went, what? And it was about an elephant named Chauncey. I'm not kidding. Tom had to come drag me out of my car. I was in such despair. An African elephant losing. I was thinking, that elephant can do it and I can't. This is ridiculous. So welcome to the new year. And if you're doing like me, well, the truth is we all need a fresh start. Let's be honest. I don't care where you are. The new year's a great place to really say, okay, we get to kind of begin again, have a restart. And you'll notice that we took that seriously. We really do as we think and plan together about our worship. Last week we began with the story of baptism, and Chris had a great sermon to get us started with that story. See, it's that story that gets us started into what we're about now. And that's to move slowly through the year together, to listen to the story of Jesus week after week and learn the story. Because isn't that what it's all about? So now in this second week, what is the story? Well, the next logical thing. Jesus picks his disciples. And notice that it is kind of a turnaround. He picks them, they don't pick him. In our society, we're in charge. Even in his society, it was unusual. He picks them. And just like we're reminded last week with Chris that Jesus' baptism is our baptism, well, this picking is also ours. Jesus has picked you. Jesus has picked me. And now our journey from this week, week after week, will be what these young men, and there were women, do with Jesus. They learn to follow him. You and I practice following. It's like a young father I heard tell his story. This is a true story. It was a dad that during the Christmas season, just passed some time ago, he was talking to his daughter, and he realized she was old enough. She's 4 years old. She was finally old enough to get the point that all the trees and the festivities and the presents and all the great stuff had more to do than with Santa Claus. She realized it really was about this baby Jesus. And she asked her dad, who is this baby Jesus? And he did a cool thing. He went, this young father, bought a children's Bible. And every day he started reading and teaching her who this Jesus really is. I was touched by it. I thought, wow-wee. And so he said week after week, day after day, they sat down early before Christmas. Afterwards, they would sit and read the story. He would read and they would talk about what was going in the story and try to explain it as best as a 4-year-old could understand. He said this went on, they got through Christmas. The week after Christmas, they were running an errand, and they were near a Catholic church in their neighborhood, and the Catholic church has a huge crucifix outside on its wall, and this crucifix has Jesus on it. And he said he drove by, and he said he looked up, didn't think much about it, and his little girl hears from the back seat the 4-year-old go, "Who is that?" And he went, "Oh, yikes, I forgot that part of the story." And he realized, though, what he had been saying about the cross had connected her. She saw the cross. She saw the church. She was getting the story. But now, why was Jesus on that cross? So he tried to explain it to her. And he told her, he taught things that made the people in the government and made often people in religion mad. And they put him to death. And he said they drove a while, and that was hard for her to digest. And something they had to revisit a little in the next days, as he kept reading every day, telling the story. Well, that went through December on into January. And then they came to this weekend, Martin Luther King weekend. He had the day off on Monday. She didn't go to her daycare. And he decided he would take her to lunch. And well, this is what happened next.
It was about a month later after that Christmas. We'd gone through the whole story of what Christmas meant. And it was mid-January. Martin Luther King Day was off. And so I knocked off work that day, and I decided we'd play, and I'd take her out to lunch. And we were sitting in there, and right on the table where we happened to plop down was the art section of the local newspaper. And there, big as life, was a huge drawing by like a 10-year-old kid in the local schools of Martin Luther King. And she said, "Who's that?" And I said, "Well, as it happens, that's Martin Luther King, and he's why you're not in school today." So we're celebrating his birthday. This is the day we celebrate his life. She said, "So who was he?" And I said, "Well, he was a preacher." And she looks up at me and goes, "For Jesus?" And I said, yeah, actually he was. But there was another thing that he was really famous for, which is that he had a message, and you're trying to say this to a 4-year-old. Well, yeah, he was a preacher, and he had a message. She said, "What was his message?" And I said, "Well, he said that you should treat everybody the same no matter what they look like." And she thought about that for a minute. And she said, "Well, that's what Jesus said." And I said, "Yeah, I guess it is. I never thought of it that way, but yeah. And that is sort of like do unto others as you would have them do unto you." And she thought for a minute and looked up at me and said, "Did they kill him too?"
They kill him too? Out of the mouths of 4-year-olds. And thank Paul Ruff for taking This American Life and putting it visually so that we could hear it and see it. Really incredible. Thank you, Paul. You see, this little girl may be 4, but she's been studying and learning and actually following. She understands that following Jesus, it's got its own world to it, doesn't it? It's something different than other parts of her life, and she's beginning to do what we try to do, is to integrate those parts, to make them fit together. And it's not that following Jesus is dangerous. Of course it is for some. I guess it always will be. Today, there are more Christians being persecuted in the world than any other religious group, by far. The numbers far exceed anything else. Now, I think that she gets that following Jesus is about consequence, that it matters, that it is life-shaping, it is life-affirming, and even at 4, you understand, she's beginning to understand that it's life-changing. That part about do unto others as you do unto them, Sometimes it may not translate well to us that what it's really about, but she gets it, that it's about this radical love that Jesus felt, lived, and preached. We are to love. We are to love. You know, those we know and those we do not know. We are to love those with whom we are similar and those that we are not. We are to love those we like and those we do not like. We are to love, love, love. As Chris reminded us last week, our baptism in Jesus is Jesus' baptism. We start the year last week, and I hope you did do this. I hope you internalized his wonderful words. That we are the beloved children of God. But now we're here this week to remind ourselves that we believe that about all of the children of God. And there are none of them outside of that all. She's already getting it at 4. There's another fellow named Chris. His last name is Bell. In the 1980s, he was in his 20s. He grew up in the Roman Catholic Church, strong Roman Catholic kid, went to school, Catholic school, graduated from college. Now he's working some, had a day job, was working with his priest, and he lived in New Jersey, they were doing an inner city work over in New York, and he really loved it, and he was really engaged in it. And they were working in a ministry that's still going today where they were working with runaways, teenagers on the street. And man, it was tough. And as a young 20-something, he was getting a harsh view of what really the street is like. And what touched him most deeply was the plight of the young teenage girls. They were often abused, especially the ones, that had no care, and most of them did not. Many of them ended up pregnant. They sought abortions because no one to take care of the baby. And that all just stirred in him. And one day he went to see his priest, Father Charles Benedict, and said, this isn't right. Something has to be done. There's got to be a way. Someone needs to stand up. And Father Benedict said to him, well, pal, why don't you do it? And he did. He was 28. He began to raise his voice, raise awareness. He started trying to raise money to see what could be done. He said he would talk to anybody listening. He went to schools, he went to his parish, went to other parishes. He didn't know what to do. He sent letters. He was just working it. He really didn't know what he was doing. And it's amazing, Tom and I were laughing, the most unusual person in the world heard about his ministry in New York because he's in New York doing a gig. And it was a former altar boy at that parish in New Jersey, Frank Sinatra, and heard about it and sent him this huge chunk of money with a letter. Frank, we were laughing, probably never went to church, but boy, something about that touched him. Chris took that money, and with his priest, Father Benedict, they co-founded the Good Counsel House that still goes today. Now there are 5 houses across the Northeast. They take in young women who are pregnant, give them a place to live, lots of love and attention. They let them stay there, safely have their babies, begin to raise their babies. They stay on. Most of them need to finish high school, and they do. Train them, help them find jobs, help them many of them go back to college. The young women really have a wonderful life there. They're taught to mentor each other once they get some time. The Good Counsel House takes no government funding, not a dime, never has. All the money is donated, mostly from church and church people. Church and church people give the money. And they support the living expenses of 250 women at any one time. Chris says the vast majority of our donors, listen to this, give because they are motivated by the love of God and the love of God's children. You see, this is big stuff, I know. And one of our concerns always is when we have these conversations, like if you don't do this huge thing, you can't do anything. But notice what happened. Chris was involved with his parish and his priest. Then Chris kind of follows. Then some people follow Chris. And then those people follow the people who followed Chris. You catch it? That's how it works. We keep moving it that way. All of us together doing what we can following Jesus. It's really not the big stuff. It's all the little things that we do that make often then the big stuff happen. Well, Chris is no longer 28. He is 60. He has been with this ministry all this time. And whatever plans he had for his life, well, they went somewhere else. But he's never complained. Don't miss this. He is a really good Catholic boy. Still is. He is very outspoken about abortion. He still is. But instead of protesting, instead of marching, instead of politicking, he put his energy to work. The way I say it is, he went to love. He went to love people who did not have people loving them. That's all he did. You know, when we learn Jesus' story, when we follow Jesus, we will be moved to love. It is inescapable. When we follow, we will be moved to love. So I caution you, I warn you, watch out. Be careful. Because you know, the opportunities to love, they're all around you. Amen.